Cape Cod is an inspiration for innovation. eSTEAMERS will introduce you to the often overlooked entrepreneurs who are building Cape Cod's future with STEAM. Join us on the journey as we discover the makers, the innovators, educators, and artists who are creating the new economy on the sandbar.
Welcome to eSTEAMERS. I'm your host today, Paula Hersey, and we're talking climate disruption. With us, two very important, very smart guests. We have Dr. Andy Jorgensen from the University of Toledo, and you have all sorts of things. You're an educator by far, the most important thing, but in chemistry as well as environmental?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And Dr. Cally Harper, you are a planner with the Cape Cod Commission, and your specialty is planning for doomsday here on the Cape.
Yeah.
So I met you, Dr. Andy, at Cape Cod Beer this past Friday night, and you're talking about climate disruption. You're doing a tour with the Cape Cod Science Cafe here on Cape Cod this week. Really kind of talk to people about the cost of doing nothing in climate change. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you're talking about this week?
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. I'm an environmental chemist, and my specialty really is education. How do people perceive reality, whether it's in the chemistry classroom, which I teach on a regular basis, or whether it's in the general public. And I've been giving a series of talks for several years now, and fortunately I was invited by the American Chemical Society Northeast local section to give a series of talks in this area to highlight issues of climate change in three dimensions, if you will. First, how do we know climate has been changing and we're at a disruption stage? Second, what can we do about it? And then third, how people feel about the issue. And I actually have clickers where I ask people to give their thoughts before and after the talk, and also their knowledge of the topic. And what I find is in just a 1-hour talk, showing all data that is from a reputable source, NASA, NOAA, Department of Energy, and show that we know very clearly that climate has changed over the past 100 and some years very rapidly. And the projections for the future, based on the history, as we know well, are that we really need to do something quickly. And so use these response devices to see people's reaction to the information. And what I find in just 1 hour of valid scientific information, people are much more concerned and much more serious about addressing the issue of climate change in their life and in the things that they do. And so my interest really is educating so that people have the facts and can make their own decisions.
That's fantastic. The talk at Cape Cod Beer, you had a pretty good audience there. We skewed your clicker information because beer is made out of water. So we were all pretty into the chemistry thing already. Dr. Cally Harper, you are saving the Cape one grant at a time. Just secured a grant from NOAA. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at the Cape Cod Commission and a little bit about that grant and why it's so important to Cape Cod?
Sure. So well, thank you, first of all, for having me on the show. So I'm a planner at the Commission. I work with all 15 towns on the Cape to draft their hazard mitigation plans. So we look at vulnerable areas of their towns to weather and climate, and then we come up with actions for how to mitigate those vulnerabilities. And we recently got a grant from NOAA, from the Regional Coastal Resiliency Program. It's brand new at NOAA, and it's a 3-year grant, substantial public outreach involved in it, and we're going out and we're looking at the data for erosion and flooding and storm surge, and figuring out what sorts of strategies can mitigate those weather hazards, and what are people's willingness to pay for those strategies, and what's the cost of doing nothing. And that's a 3-year program, and it kicked off in March, so we're really excited about it.
That's fantastic. So I'm with 2 extremely smart people, so I want you to solve all the problems today, and then we'll be done with this climate disruption. But I like the 2 words of mitigation and adaptation. Regardless of where you are on the spectrum of climate change, whether you believe in it or not, it is happening. So when we look at mitigation, what are some of the things in your talk as you're going through and you're speaking to people? You've got the history behind you. So talk just a little bit about the history, and then what's some of these mitigation things that are happening in communities that might either slow down or somewhat reverse some of the climate change disruption that we're seeing?
Well, very good questions, and these are things, as you know, I addressed distinctly in my talk. The first 2 key words about mitigation is don't waste. Don't waste. If we don't need to use a particular energy, then don't use it, whether it's turning off the lights in your house, whether it's recycling, because the aluminum can be reused virtually an unlimited number of times. And keep track of what you're doing in the way of heating and cooling in your house, driving your vehicle. So if you're not wasting, then you reduce the problem right there. The other area that I talk to people about in the presentations are, since you've just seen this 1 hour of data, of solid data, talk to other people about it. Get the message out there, and that's why we stress in terms of education. I speak to the introductory chemistry students at University of Toledo and some other students, and once they see the facts, they realize, well, this is important. And when you find out something's important in your life, whatever it may be, exercise, eating right, whatever it is, you share that information with other people. And so it's a magnifying effect, if you will. So mitigation can definitely reduce the potential problem. It's suggested that maybe 1/3 of the international goals for keeping down the raised temperature of the earth can be achieved just by conservation, just by wasting less. And of course, everyone knows if you waste less, you're saving money in the process. Right. Even if it takes something like spending a little money to insulate your house. I did that several years ago, and within a couple of years, it pays itself back. And every year after that, whether I own the house or someone after me owns the house, they'll be saving energy. And it's financial as well as environmental impact that's being reduced by this. So mitigation is a way, let's reduce the consequence of the problem by doing things that are just smart anyway.
Right. So, the county actually has all sorts of departments that kind of address what he just talked about. Can you kind of share with our viewers some of the things and some of the county departments that are already addressing this?
Yeah, we have a lot of resources at the county. As far as energy and conservation and renewable energy, the first thing that comes to mind is Cape Light Compact. They're doing excellent work on the policy side, but also with homeowners and going in and doing inspections. There's also the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension that has a lot of education and outreach programs on pretty much everything under the sun. They do really great work. They do hazardous waste. Everything from hazardous waste to ticks.
Right.
So it's just a really great resource that we have, and that's also in collaboration with WHOE Grant.
Right. Well, my husband and I are huge fans of Cape Light Compact. Our studio was outfitted with LED lights just recently, so we're, not only walking the walk, but we're talking the walk, right?
Yeah.
And then we did that home insulation. We did the attic insulation through the Cape Light Compact, and literally the difference in heating was amazing. It was one of those things that you didn't really think was going to make a difference, and then a year later, we look at our bill for the same time last year, it's like, wow. That really does make a difference. LED lights obviously now coming in. So a lot of, there's mitigation and then there's adaptation. But there's also so many things that contribute to the disruption of climate. So talk a little bit about some of those things. In your talk, there was a few, oh my gosh, moments. We can't believe that. One was it's not China that's actually one of those countries that's, just producing so much. It's actually the United States. But eating meat.
Yeah.
Can you talk to a few of those points that
and
you had?
These are shocking revelations, if you will, of scientific fact. And shock is a way to educate, by the way. That's a good educational tool. If you surprise somebody, they're more likely to remember it. Well, China is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, there's no question about it, but it's also the largest country in the world by far. So they release twice as much greenhouse gases as the United States, but they are 4 times the size in population. So per person in the United States, we release more than twice as much per person. And per person is the way to look at it, because if you're looking at individual responsibility. And that has gone on for quite a number of years. Over the past, over 100 years, of all the greenhouse gases released by humans in the atmosphere, 1/4 of them have come from the United States, when we're less than 5% of the world. So we live a very comfortable life, and it's wonderful that we do. I mean, the economic development in the United States allows most people to live in comfortable lives with sufficient food and housing and the like, and we don't want to take anything away from that. We just want to do it in a more prudent fashion. In places in other parts of the world like China, where the people do not live a very comfortable life and are trying to have a better life, but to do it prudently. So education in both countries is important, and China seems to be coming to grips with it for various other reasons. As everyone knows, the terrible air pollution, which is a separate but really related problem in a country like China. And so the government is working hard at it. For example, the largest solar panel manufacturer is China. The United States does produce some. One of the political issues is China can undercut the price of American solar panels, and that has hurt our industry some. We're hoping that's going to get better. There's a big change, legal change coming in China on solar panels. And so we have to look at it as individuals. You talked about meat. Of meat, chicken is the most efficient in terms of putting a pound of chicken on your table, whereas pork, it's more than 3 times as much greenhouse gases to get that pound of pork, and beef is extremely inefficient. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of feed, fertilizer, transportation, and beef is 7 times as much carbon dioxide to get to your table as chicken does.
7 times?
7 times.
Wow.
7 times. Cows live a long time. Chickens live a couple of weeks, okay? And you can have a full chicken in a couple of weeks. They're very efficient at taking their feed to produce meat for us to eat. And so things like that, and the United States is just a phenomenal consumer of beef, and that's one of the factors that is the reason why we release so many greenhouse gases in the United States.
We're also a real consumer of plastics, which just drives me nuts. I go to the grocery store, and everything now comes in these bizarre, yes, we can recycle them, but it costs money in energy, a lot of energy, to produce the plastics, the petroleum.
And the majority of the plastics are not recycled. People don't actually recycle them. So cloth bags are something my wife and I adopted several years ago, reusing them. I mentioned that plastic to the person who's bagging. You may need that plastic in the future in your life as something realistic, a replacement knee or something like that, okay, rather than wasting that way. So yes, and everything that is waste. I have a picture in my talk, as you know, of a landfill. And every bit of material in that landfill has waste, and it took energy to produce, and to make the energy, in almost all cases, generated greenhouse gases.
So what do you do when you get into a outreach mode, Cally, while you're talking to the towns? You know, your average citizen doesn't always hear of these things. We really need the folks of Cape Cod to go to their town meeting, to go to these outreach type of education. So how do you get this complex information into an average citizen's mind? How do you do that?
It's a really, really good question. So the first thing that we normally do when we go out is we spend a lot of time in preparation for the first meeting with the public, and we collect the data, and we translate that data in a way that's easy for everyone to understand, no matter what background or you come from, and explain to them and show them what the vulnerabilities are in their town, in their county, and even the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
What are some of those vulnerabilities?
So some of the vulnerabilities for us, the big ones, are flooding and coastal erosion, and those come from hurricanes, nor'easters. So those are really the 2 main hazards that we're dealing with. As you know, our dunes are eroding away, that obviously shrinks the land that we have to live on, and then as water rises, whether it's from sea level rise or flooding or superstorms that come, or whether it's urban drainage, so there's a drainage problem in town and you just get a lot of water on your streets. So it's really water and erosion is what we mostly talk about on the Cape. So in these meetings, we go out and we talk to people about what the data says. This isn't stuff that people at the county are making up. We're relying on data from federal, state partners that have huge labs of people that are looking at this stuff every day. And so we show them what those vulnerabilities are, and then we ask them what their opinions are. Do they have anything to share, that local knowledge of that data? What are their opinions about how we can fix it? And discuss what those options are and how much they cost and where we can get the money from. So that's really a two-part process.
Okay, so we've talked money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of these types of mitigation things or adaptations have an upfront cost.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things is when we were sitting here talking during the sound check is, what is the cost of doing nothing? So, address that, because I think people always think, well, geez, I can't be assessed anymore on my taxes. I'm paying an enormous amount right now. But if you live near the coast and you don't pay a little bit more in those taxes, you might not have a house there anymore in 10 to 15 years. And it's that close. It's not, 30 or 40, 50 years. It's literally 10 to 15 years away here.
Well, the cost actually is broadly shared, if you will, but felt by everyone. Flood insurance, okay, if you're living in a place that flood insurance is required, flood insurance is not a capital market in that all these companies are vying to insure your place for flood. It's a federal government subsidizes flood insurance. So every time there's a hurricane that comes across Florida and there's billions of dollars worth of damage, or Hurricane Sandy was about $65 billion. Wow. Flood insurance is subsidized by all American taxpayers. You're paying it in your federal income tax. So it's a cost that's somewhat hidden to you. It's not in an assessment in your annual property tax bill, but you're paying for it in that particular way. And so if you're not doing something about it, those costs will go up. And so if we keep rebuilding those areas, the cost is shared. Now, to be fair, the ocean has not risen that much over the past several decades, just about 7 inches, that's all. But as you say, it's going to go more quickly over the next several decades. And by 2100, which seems like a long time, but there are people alive today who are going to be alive in 2100, okay? Right. And the ocean might very well be a full 3 feet higher than it is now. So look at the places that you're at in the Cape and think about water. And of course, there's the tide that goes up and down, maybe 3 feet, 4 feet, depending where you're at. But it's going to be another 3 feet on top of what your high tide is right now during the future high tides. And what that'll mean in terms of lost resources, what it'll mean in terms of damages, the cost will be significant. And it's either pay now or pay later, the classic thing in terms of efficiency and other issues.
3 feet.
Yeah, well, what brings to, what came to mind for me is, the Cape is really unique. We're a peninsula, we're sticking out in the middle of the ocean. Every single town, all 15 towns on the Cape have a coastline. So there's some of that in Florida, but Florida is really big.
Right.
It's wider than we are. So, when you think about rising water, whether it's from flooding or sea level rise, a lot of our infrastructure and homes are right on the coast. And so when water rises, we're very vulnerable.
Right, well, P-Town will be an island.
Yeah.
There will be no Truro, because Truro would be underwater.
Yeah.
Truro's the ground zero, really, I think. At least P-Town goes back up onto a hill a little bit, so you might have a rock or two you could stand on and build a house on, but Truro literally would be underwater.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's come out of a lot of our vulnerability assessments through hazard mitigation planning, but also through our work with Federal Highway, is that the roads to the Outer Cape, specifically the East Orleans Rotary and the area near Pilgrim Lake or East Harbor and Truro, those will become inundated with water, is what our models are telling us. And then that makes the Outer Cape an island. That makes it really hard to give emergency services in and out of those areas, and that's scary.
Or economic development, for that matter. You know,
or education,
or education,
or other resources that you might want to use.
Yeah,
and remember
utilities.
that's utilities. So 3 feet on the average, but with storm surge, as you mentioned, look what the hurricanes do on storm surge, is many, many feet above that. So on a short period of time, you could have significant damage.
Yeah.
That's amazing, huh? You talked a little bit about the history. You had a question for Dr. Andy, which was, how do you determine the timing? And you came back to say, well, it's in the history of climate change.
The area I live in, we live on near Lake Erie. Toledo is on the Maumee River near the mouth of Lake Erie. And of course, that was covered by glaciers eons ago. And so we have historical record. I have colleagues in the environmental science department who drill cores down into the earth and under lakes and lands and can track what things happened and, you know, when did the glaciers recede, when were they formed. And so we know how the earth responds to many things. What's happening now is the change is so rapid. Okay, I use as an example is the carbon dioxide in the air over the lifetime of individuals. My mother happens to be 93 years old. And when she was born, it was just a little over 300 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's now well over 400 parts per million, over a third. And when you change, that's the world, that's worldwide. When you change a world system that much in one person's lifetime, there are going to be consequences of it. And so our temperature change has not been enormous yet. It's been a little less than 2 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's one in which I use the analogy of a child's fever. Right. If your child has a fever of 2 degrees Fahrenheit, you don't ignore it, you deal with it. Right. And by 2050, the lifetime of many, many people still alive today, that could easily be, the middle of the projections is about 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. So a serious problem of things like crops growing and pests. There are pests that are more prevalent. Malaria is surely going up, and it's already a problem in many parts of the world. And so these changes are ones that are happening so rapidly that we can't adapt to it. So we do have to worry about adaptation to the extent we can, but things like diseases will be there, things like food shortages and drought. California is particularly vulnerable. 2/3 of all our fruits and nuts come from one state, the state of California, and they're experiencing a significant drought. So the consequences are very, very broad. The projections have a range, of course, but just like when you go to the physician, and by the way, use the term about belief in climate change. Well, do you believe that bacteria causes infections? Well, of course it does. It's a known fact. And the question is, which antibiotic will cure it? The same thing. We know that the Earth's climate has been changed by humans, primarily by humans. And therefore, what do we do about it? Just like what antibiotic to use. And there's no guarantees. But you know, if you don't give the antibiotics, it's going to get worse. Right. Okay, you may survive it, but it's still going to get worse over time. So it's really looking at the facts and then deciding what's the best solution. We're in a stage where we do have some choices yet. The changes have not been that dramatic yet. They've been real and they've been consequential, but we have choices. So let's make those choices before we're no longer able to make choices.
So the commission has actually got some really cool applications that they're developing that kind of address this piece of, especially for development and where things are going and what the future is going to hold. Can you address some of that?
Yeah, so we've developed this thing on our website where we've put all the tools that we've made over the last several years into a black box, is what we're calling it. And because we understand that not everybody can go to a public meeting, but we want to share that information, that data. So we have a sea level rise tool. It's a bathtub model, which means that it doesn't incorporate the movement of the land and the transport of sediment into the model. It's just raising the water over the land, just like you would in your bathtub. Or people can go and find their home and see what it's going to look like with 1 foot of sea level rise and a Category 3 hurricane. You can click it on and see if you're underwater, or if you're in a low-lying area. Maybe you'll have, if you're in that low-lying area, maybe you'll have flooding or water issues going forward. So you can play around with it online. And then we hope that you will, so that you'll come out and maybe vote at town meeting or come out to some of our more technical meetings that we're going to have about some of these issues.
So quite a few towns have already kind of done their hazard mitigation with your help and the commission's help. How many towns left that really haven't addressed this?
So I've been with help from the commission and then with FEMA, funding from FEMA, we've been hitting up those towns quite a bit over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I think 12 of the towns on the Cape are in the process of hazard mitigation planning. That's the plan that they have to do to look at these vulnerabilities and set up these actions. And that's amazing. That's very rare across the Commonwealth and counties. And then we only have about 3 towns that are working on it, or they're interested in it. They just haven't kicked off. Okay. So we're ready to go, and a lot of funding agencies really love the fact that we're doing the hard planning work first. We're putting the effort in to figuring out where our vulnerabilities are, and then we can just pull out projects and start adapting to some of these changing conditions.
That's amazing for the United States. There are not many parts of the country that are planning to the extent that you're talking about. And of course you need to, because being the peninsula, there are parts of the country where the word climate phrase can't even be used in governments, because they're ignoring that particular problem. And like so many other things in life, if you ignore a problem, it tends to get worse, and people are going to have to ask afterwards, why weren't you dealing with this? The information was there. Other communities like the Cape are dealing with it. Why aren't you dealing with it?
Well, we're almost out of time. This is, I mean, we could talk about this all day. I'm absolutely fascinated by the subject myself, but I want to leave our viewers with 2 of your favorite mitigation tips that they can do right from home.
Talk to other people. It magnifies everything you do, all your recycling, all your energy conservation. If you talk to another person and they do the same, you've just doubled whatever you did.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
How
I think that would be the same. Connect with people, come out, use our tools, come to our meetings, and if you can't, you can call me up and I'm happy to talk to you.
That's fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure. I hope you have enjoyed your visit. I guess
Very
you've
much,
had the tour of Cape Cod with the folks from the Cape Cod Science Cafe and the Chemical Society. So
and eating the seafood, and of course the acidification of the oceans is another factor of this.
Oh, that's one of Callie's favorites.
And if your seafood is one of my favorites, okay. And no fertilizer needed to get the seafood out. Right. And the acidification of the ocean, which is being studied right up here at Woods Hole in your neighborhood. That's a big economic impact if the consequences are as great as they might be.
Well, thank you very much. I really, really appreciated you taking a stop here at the Media Center to talk to us. And Cally, always a pleasure. I'm sure we'll see you on more eSTEAMER shows as we start to talk a little bit more about climate in the coming year. Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Paula Hersey, and this is eSTEAMERS.
Like Caroline Harper and Andy Jorgensen, there are many other scientists who are just as committed to enhancing the science and sustainability of Cape Cod. Many of these scientists are associated with the Marine Biological Laboratory, located in Woods Hole and established in 1888. The Marine Biological Laboratory, otherwise known as the MBL, is committed to biological discovery with a focus on marine life. On the 4th of July, the MBL Club organized the annual parade, which featured many of these brilliant students, professors, and researchers. The MBL calls this event a celebration of all things Woods Hole, from the MBL itself to sea life, science, and all things quirky. Both year-round and summer programs of the MBL have participated in the parade. One of the summer organizations that came out to represent their work was SPINES, the summer program in neuroscience, ethics, and survival. SPINES is a 1-month experience that trains students in the field of neuroscience so that they may excel in the professional world and participate in great research opportunities. Another big hit at the parade were the Grass Fellows, who dressed in grass skirts and hula danced their way down Water Street. The Grass Foundation works year-round and hosts fellows for the summer. The people partaking in the Grass Foundation Fellowship Program are committed to research in the neurophysiological field. Perhaps one of the most entertaining groups was the Embryology Department. This is a program offered at the MBL as well, and is available to grad students, postdoctoral fellows, and other senior researchers seeking to gain a better understanding of issues and conflicts surrounding developmental biology. In addition to these departments, many other supporting groups came to walk and showcase the MBL's work. From political campaigns to local businesses, this parade had many diverse characters and performances. The MBL attracts some of the world's leading scientists and students. Over the years, this staff has been comprised of professors, students, and scientists, including 56 Nobel Prize winners, 124 Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigators, 241 members of the National Academy of Sciences, and 213 members of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. With scientists like these and other scientists such as Caroline Harper and Andy Jorgensen, Cape Cod has become home to some of the most dedicated scientists in their fields. For more information on research opportunities and scientific exploration, visit the Marine Biological Laboratory to learn how you can improve tomorrow's environment today.